They may imprison me, but do not let the Ottomans die with me.
July 20th, 1402. Across Europe, church bells rang in celebration. For the first time, the world believed the Ottoman Empire was finished. Only months earlier, they had been the nightmare of an entire continent. But after a single battle, everything collapsed. So who was the man who brought an empire to its knees? His name was Tamerlane, one of the most feared conquerors in history. This is the story of the day the Ottoman Empire almost disappeared and how it returned to change world history only 51 years later. July 20th, 1402. The dry plains of Ankara were about to decide the fate of an empire. On one side stood Sultan Bayezid I, the ruler known as the Thunderbolt. And there was a reason for that name. Bayezid had built his reputation on speed. To him, war was a race, and he was almost always faster than his enemies. He had crushed one of the greatest crusader armies of the Middle Ages at Nicopolis. He had placed Constantinople under relentless pressure. By 1402, Bayezid stood at the height of his power. But that success had created something far more dangerous: overconfidence. In his eyes, Tamerlane, the conqueror from the east, was simply another obstacle to remove. Bayezid wanted one decisive battle, the same brutal answer that had broken so many enemies before. But that confidence was leading him directly into the greatest trap of his life. The march toward Ankara had been brutal. Under the scorching Anatolian summer sun, Ottoman soldiers struggled beneath the weight of their armor. War horses that had carried armies across kingdoms were now collapsing from exhaustion and thirst. Dust filled the sky, and morale began to weaken. But Bayezid kept moving. His army had only one objective left: find Tamerlane and destroy him. Bayezid believed his enemy was retreating. He believed he was finally closing in. What he did not realize was that every mile his army marched tightened the noose around him. Then, at last, the two armies met near Ankara, and something strange happened. Silence fell across the battlefield. Tamerlane did not attack. He did not send his cavalry forward or order his archers to open fire. Timur simply waited. Every hour beneath the burning sun weakened Ottoman morale. Bayezid grew increasingly frustrated, but that was exactly what Tamerlane wanted. He did not need to overpower his enemy immediately. He only needed to understand him. Timur knew what Bayezid would do before the Sultan even drew his sword. By waiting, Tamerlane turned the army of the Thunderbolt into exhausted and impatient men. His calm patience had turned Bayezid's pride against him. By the time the Sultan realized he had walked into a trap, it was already too late. Ankara would not be the place where Bayezid claimed another victory. It would be the place where he paid for every mistake that brought him there. But how did Tamerlane understand Bayezid's weaknesses so well? Why had these two men come to hate each other so deeply that neither would walk away? The answer lay in a series of extraordinary letters exchanged before the battle. Letters filled with threats, insults, and challenges so provocative that historians still debate their exact wording. This was no longer just a war between two armies. It was a collision between two of the most powerful conquerors of their age, and the Battle of Ankara had only just begun. To understand why these two empires were destined to collide, we must first look at Anatolia. It was a land divided among small Turkish principalities, known as beyliks. Bayezid wanted to bring these lands under Ottoman rule, but the rulers who lost their territories refused to disappear. they fled east, seeking protection from Tamerlane. At the same time, Timur's own enemies found shelter with Bayezid. Without realizing it, the two conquerors had become protectors of each other's rivals. That made conflict almost impossible to avoid. But before armies moved, the war began on parchment. The letters exchanged between them were no longer diplomacy. They became weapons of pride, insult, and personal hatred. Tamerlane mocked Bayezid as a ruler swollen by arrogance. He ridiculed the humble origins of the Ottoman dynasty, and he challenged the Sultan to face a power greater than any enemy before him. Bayezid answered with fury. To him, Timur was not a rightful ruler. He was a destroyer from the east, leaving burned cities and broken kingdoms behind him. Every letter pushed the two rulers closer to war. Bayezid remained defiant. He had crushed the Crusaders at Nicopolis. He was tightening his grip around Constantinople, and he believed Timur was only another enemy waiting to be broken. But Bayezid was wrong. In 1400, Timur devastated the city of Sivas. That was no longer an insult written in ink. It was a warning written in blood. The war had begun. Yet Bayezid did not immediately abandon his western ambitions. His attention remained divided between Anatolia, the Balkans, and Constantinople. That hesitation gave Timur something priceless: time to study his enemy. He studied Bayezid's pride. He studied his need for speed. And he saw the weakness hidden inside the Thunderbolt's greatest strength. Bayezid did not want a long war. He wanted one decisive battle to erase Timur from his path. That was exactly the kind of enemy Timur knew how to destroy.
He did not need to defeat Bayezid's courage. He needed to turn that courage into impatience.
He did not need to break Bayezid's strength. He needed to make that strength move in the wrong direction. Bayezid believed he was preparing to hunt Timur, but Timur was already preparing the trail. The question was no longer whether these two rulers would fight. The question was where. And by the time Bayezid marched toward Ankara, Timur had already begun choosing the ground where the Thunderbolt would fall.
Bayezid believed he was forcing Tamerlane into a decisive battle,
but he was completely wrong. From the beginning, Timur was controlling the tempo of the campaign. The moment he understood the Ottoman line of march, he made his decisive move. He did not dig in and wait for Bayezid to arrive. Instead, he ordered forced marches across central Anatolia. His army cut across Bayezid's route and reached Ankara first. That single move changed the shape of the coming battle. Ankara did not become the battlefield by accident. It became the battlefield because Timur had chosen it himself. He had studied the hills, roads, and water sources before Bayezid arrived. So when the Ottoman army reached the area, they did not find a retreating enemy. They found an opponent already standing on prepared ground. By then, Timur held the water, the high ground, and the best observation points. The balance had shifted before the first arrow was fired. Bayezid still had one final choice. He could withdraw, regroup, and wait for reinforcements from the west and the Balkans. A cautious commander would probably have chosen that path. But Bayezid was never cautious. He was the Thunderbolt, a ruler who believed speed could decide every war. His pride would never allow him to turn away in front of Timur. To Bayezid, that battle line was not a warning. It was a challenge. His boldness, impatience, and instinct for action left him with only one answer. He would attack. And that was exactly what Timur had been waiting for. Under the July sun, the cost of the march became impossible to ignore. Thousands of Ottoman soldiers stood exhausted after days of movement across Anatolia. Their armor burned beneath the heat, Their horses strained to remain standing. Their throats were dry with thirst. Across the field, Timur's men held the water and waited calmly. He did not need to attack immediately. He only needed heat, thirst, and frustration to weaken the Ottoman ranks. The longer Bayezid waited, the weaker his army became. The farther he advanced, the more exposed his soldiers would be. From the high ground, Timur watched the Ottoman formation begin to strain. He saw an army still dangerous, but no longer fully stable. The men were tired. The commanders were tense. And at the center stood a sultan becoming exactly what Timur needed him to become: impatient. Timur had turned terrain, heat, and thirst into weapons. But his most dangerous weapon was hidden inside Bayezid's own army. Many men in the Ottoman ranks came from Anatolian lands Bayezid had conquered. Their banners were Ottoman. Their wounds were not. Before the battle began, Timur had reached toward those old loyalties. Not with arrows, but with promises. He offered revenge, restored honor, and the hope of old power returning. So, as the two armies formed at dawn, Bayezid saw soldiers waiting for orders. Timur saw men waiting for a signal.
That was the true danger of Ankara. The Ottoman army did not need to be destroyed only from the outside. It could be broken from within. And once loyalty cracked, no courage could fully repair it. No command could fully stop it. No sultan, not even the Thunderbolt, could outrun it. The drums began to roll across the field. Banners lifted beneath the burning Anatolian sun. Bayezid prepared for the direct assault that had made him famous. Timur prepared for the moment when pressure would become collapse. Then the order came. The Ottoman line surged forward, and the Battle of Ankara finally exploded. The first Ottoman assault struck with tremendous force. Wave after wave, Bayezid's soldiers pushed directly toward Timur's center. For a brief moment, it looked as though the Thunderbolt might overwhelm his enemy once again. The Janissaries advanced with remarkable discipline, holding the center of the Ottoman line. At the same time, Ottoman cavalry pressed hard against both flanks. This was how Bayezid had won so many battles before: fast, direct, relentless. But Timur refused to answer with a full-scale attack. Instead, his mounted archers rode forward, released their arrows, and vanished before the Ottomans could reach them. Again and again, the same deadly rhythm repeated. Every charge pulled Bayezid's soldiers farther from their original formation. Every pursuit stretched the line a little thinner. The July heat became unbearable. Exhausted horses struggled beneath the sun. Thirst spread through the ranks faster than fear. The trap Timur had prepared was finally beginning to work. Then everything changed. Banners inside the Ottoman army suddenly began to move. One Anatolian contingent pulled away from the line, then another, then another. Soldiers who had marched beneath Bayezid's banner were now riding toward Timur. Confusion swept across the battlefield. Officers shouted conflicting orders as entire formations stopped fighting. Bayezid watched in disbelief. His army was not simply losing men, it was collapsing from within. For the first time in years, the Thunderbolt hesitated. Timur had been waiting for exactly that moment, and now he ordered the full advance. The battle that began with Ottoman confidence was turning into disaster. Timur's forces surged forward as the Ottoman formation cracked. What started as an attack became a fight for survival. On the flanks, confusion quickly turned into panic. Men who had followed Bayezid across Europe now searched for escape. But the Janissaries in the center refused to break. They closed around their sultan like a wall of steel. Bayezid could see the ruin spreading around him, yet the Thunderbolt did not retreat.
He ordered his remaining loyal soldiers to hold the center. For one final moment, Ottoman courage still burned beneath the arrows, but courage could not rebuild a collapsing army. Timur's cavalry swept around the broken flanks with terrifying freedom. They struck from the sides and cut off every path of escape. Every attack forced Bayezid's last defenders into a smaller circle. The field that once promised victory had become a prison. Then Bayezid's horse was brought down in the chaos. The Thunderbolt fell into the dust of Ankara. Before he could escape, Timur's soldiers closed around him. Bayezid I, ruler of the Ottoman Empire, was captured alive. For years, Bayezid had been the storm moving across Europe. Now that storm had been stopped in the dust of Ankara. Timur had not simply defeated an army. He had captured the man who held the Ottoman world together. In front of his own soldiers, the legend of the Thunderbolt had broken. But the greatest disaster was not Bayezid's capture. It was what his capture left behind. The empire had lost its center in a single day. No clear hand remained to hold the state together. Bayezid's sons did not unite around one throne. Each prince saw the same opportunity. Each believed he had the right to rule, and each knew that hesitation could mean death. The power that had terrified Europe now turned its sword inward. Province against province, brother against brother, army against army. What Timur destroyed at Ankara was not only Bayezid's army. He destroyed the fear that had kept the Ottoman world united. Constantinople, once trapped beneath Ottoman pressure, suddenly gained time. Across Europe, the news sounded almost impossible. The empire that had seemed unstoppable was now bleeding from within. The Battle of Ankara was over, but the Ottoman nightmare had only begun. Because Timur did not need to destroy the empire himself. Bayezid's own sons would finish the work for him. And for the next 11 years, the Ottoman Empire would bleed from the inside. After Ankara, the empire did not collapse in one dramatic explosion. It broke apart slowly, province by province, throne by throne. Bayezid was still alive, but he was no longer free. The man who once terrified kings could no longer command his own blood. Without his command, the Ottoman world began to fracture. Across Anatolia, old rulers returned to lands Bayezid had taken from them. The Beyliks, swallowed by Ottoman power, now saw a chance to rise again. Timur did not need to govern those lands directly. He only needed to undo what Bayezid had built. Cities that once obeyed the Sultan now waited to see which prince would survive. Bayezid's sons did not gather to save their father's empire. They gathered to claim what remained of it. Each prince believed the throne belonged to him, and each knew mercy could become a death sentence. So the sons of Bayezid did what foreign enemies had failed to do. They turned the Ottoman sword against itself. Brother fought brother for control of the shattered state. Armies that once marched together now faced each other across ruined fields. Soldiers who survived Timur now died beneath Ottoman banners. In the West, Christian rulers watched the chaos with disbelief. Constantinople, once trapped beneath Bayezid's blockade, suddenly gained precious time. Across the Balkans, fear of Ottoman expansion began to weaken. For the first time in decades, Europe saw the Ottomans as vulnerable. But the deeper danger was inside Ottoman lands. Every province, fortress, and commander became part of the succession war. Choosing the wrong side could mean losing everything. Bayezid had built his power through speed, conquest, and fear. After Ankara, those same forces turned against his heirs. The throne became the most dangerous object in the Ottoman world. Whoever claimed it first
could be murdered by his own blood, and whoever hesitated could vanish before the next sunrise. Then Bayezid died in captivity. With his death, the last symbol of unity disappeared. There was no father left to command obedience, no sultan left to end the argument. Only sons, armies, ambitions, and a throne stained by disaster. For 11 long years, the Ottoman Empire lived inside this nightmare. It survived betrayal, battle, and collapse. But survival was not recovery. By the end of the Civil War, its prestige had been shattered. Its enemies had learned that the Ottomans could bleed. Yet from the ashes of Bayezid's disaster, one prince understood the truth. The empire could not be saved by conquest alone. It had to be rebuilt before it could rise again. And from that ruin, a new Ottoman ruler would emerge, not as a thunderbolt, but as a survivor. After 11 years of civil war, one prince finally rose above the others. His name was Mehmed I. He was not remembered as the greatest conqueror of his house. He did not have Bayezid's terrifying speed or Mehmed II's world-changing fame. But he had the one quality the broken state needed most: patience. Mehmed understood that conquest could not save a realm tearing itself apart. Before it could expand again, it had to obey again. So he restored order across the lands still loyal to his dynasty. He forced rival factions back under one authority. He repaired the bond between the throne, the army, and the provinces. This was not the glory of a battlefield victory. It was the harder work of rebuilding power after humiliation. Ankara had destroyed Bayezid's dream of immediate domination, but it also forced his successors to become more durable, less dependent on one man's speed and less blinded by one ruler's pride, more capable of surviving catastrophe. By the time Mehmed I restored the foundations of power, the story had changed. It was no longer only about how the Ottomans had fallen. It was about how they refused to disappear. Today, the plain near Chubuk is quiet. The armies are gone, and the dust of Ankara has settled. But this was where the Ottoman Empire almost disappeared. Not in Europe, or before the walls of Constantinople, but on a dry Anatolian plain near the modern capital of Turkey. Today, Ankara is the political heart of a modern nation. That makes the defeat of 1402 more than a battlefield memory. It stands as a warning about power, pride, and survival. Ankara proved that speed without judgment can become a trap. It proved that even the strongest throne can fall when loyalty begins to crack. Bayezid wanted to move like lightning, but lightning cannot rebuild what it burns. Timur won the battle and broke the Thunderbolt. He shattered Ottoman confidence in a single day, but he did not erase the Ottoman future. That future was rebuilt from ruin, betrayal, and civil war. And 51 years after Ankara, another Mehmed stood before Constantinople. The city Bayezid had failed to take. The city that had outlived empires, sieges, and centuries of war. In 1453, its walls finally fell, and the empire that nearly died at Ankara became the power that ended the last Roman world. Today, Istanbul still carries that memory in stone, in its walls, its domes, and the Bosphorus where civilizations meet. And above all, in Hagia Sophia, a monument where Roman, Byzantine, Christian, Islamic, and Ottoman histories still stand together. That is why Ankara matters. Not because the Ottomans lost there, but because they survived a defeat that should have erased them. An empire can fall in a single day, but an empire that learns from collapse can return stronger than before. And when the Ottomans returned,
the world was never the same again.